this time it's working. So, thank you, Nicolas. Thank you all. Welcome to this roundtable. I don't want to say that it is the roundtable that one has to attend, but if you listen to the others, they all ended with the same word, call to action, call to commitment. So that's easy, very easy to do a call to commitment. Well, let's see how we do that, actually. So we have to go beyond this mandatory path. And this roundtable is the answer to the question how to recreate hope. And this is what we're going to demonstrate today. So we are not going to talk about ChatGPT. We're not going to talk about degrowth. It won't be an issue of risk management. There could be artificial intelligence, but I don't believe that there is artificial commitment. So it is possible to talk about degrowth or, to modelize degrowth, but it's more difficult to modelize degrowth. You don't need to be in debt to be committed. You can go without limitations. You don't need any magic money. And it is, so if you want to, thank you to the Cercle for all these years. Thank you for programming this roundtable and giving the coordination. It's a great present for me. And I think it's a great present for you as well. So today we give you free fuel which does not emit CO2, which can be endlessly recyclable, and more. We will give you the mode of operation of the fuel that makes it possible to change the world. Changing the world seems very arrogant. Tolstoy warned us. Tolstoy said everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change oneself. We are at the heart of the topic, and Gandhi said, be the change that you want for the world. So indeed, if we want to say that re-giving hope goes through commitment, how does it work? Commitment can be individual, it can be collective. So when I was younger, we talked about political commitment and sometimes, also unionized. But you will see with our panel that there are thousands of forms of commitment. In fact, the principle of commitment is endless. It is a world where we don't talk about, dégagistes, but engage, being engaged. Or we don't say they should have done this or that. They say we could do this, we could do that. A world where ill has become us. So, or we don't want to go into our own little garden to retreat behind the fence and resist the world. No, mystery is out of my control. Well, I don't want this. We want to resist to shrinkage, a world where once again we are committed for the most ambitious to change the world, for some to change themselves, for others simply to calm down because something is going to be done, and to others just to forget. The members of the panel will give us testimonies. The objective of the question is not to provide an exhaustive answer to the question, how do you engage yourself to change the world, but just to fuel your appetite, to give you, for you to look at the menu and to leave X tonight by saying, okay, I learned a lot of things, but now I'm going to go for it. And to say, as we said early on, get committed so that we said. So thank you, Nicolas. So now, can you only hear me? Because, okay, it's all well. Now, Sinead Burke, next to Bertrand, who is the CEO of Tilting the Lens. It is a consulting office which helps companies opening big corporations that in the outlets, but also in the offering of products, they have to think about products. So think about people who are not exactly like the others. And this is an Irish woman, and they, no clothing supply was for her. So she wrote a book for that. So in September 2019, she was at the head of Vogue in the 15 most influential women. Christian Clot, it is in Christian Clot, is Human Adaptation Institute. He's a writer. Maud Goba, she is the head of Micro Rainbow. She provides analysis to help. She has to refugees and LGBTs. She provides something like 25,000 housing sites. And Maud recently was appointed 100 women among the 100 women of BBC Ashwini Kaka, President of Action Against Hunger, Action contre la faim, this non-profit organization created in 1979 following the involvement of a group of intellectuals. He's an entrepreneur, philanthropist in India, and he was elected President of Action contre la faim in October 2020. And finally, with Bianca Duty, CEO communication of L'Oréal Group, needs no presentation. She's also a member of the executive committee. So 3 questions. Cherry on the cake. I hope the first 2 questions, we'll do them in one shot. Because first question, what do you do? And they will explain to us what they do. And the underlying question that we will address at the same time is why did you do it? What was the driver? So, Sinead.
Bonjour, je suis très désolée que je parle en anglais. Maintenant, j'apprends le français. But merci beaucoup. Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here. I'm going to go rogue and not just answer your question, but to think about the larger conversation that we are having here today about how do we create change. For me, I believe that there are 3 routes: individual, collective, and systemic. But the first moment in which I realized that change was needed was when I was studying to be a primary school teacher. Je suis institutrice. I was standing at the top of the classroom, and je suis un petit garçon. And I realized very quickly that the classroom was not designed for me as a teacher. Lots of people had questions. How would I control the children? They would be bigger than me. How would I reach the items on the wall? How would I teach them? What I realized was that that was based on people's assumptions that a teacher should be non-disabled. And how I went about that was I just changed the design of the room. So instead of the children sitting in clusters and in groups and tables, they sat in a U shape and we were at eye level. Whilst I couldn't hang up the artwork on the walls or turn on and off the light switch, what it did was create opportunities for the children in the classroom to do that for me and for us to work together. It provided innovation and collaboration. From that, I decided to not just change the classroom, but boldly try to change the fashion system and maybe a little bit of the world. But there are 3 things that I have learned in terms of how we do this and how we do this together. For me, the big ambition from today and from the work is for us to move from awareness to action. Regarding the topic of disability and accessibility, often we talk, but what changes have come about? But really, in reality, particularly around disability, sometimes we do not even talk because we do not know what to say. And often when we do not know what to say and we fear saying the wrong thing, we say nothing at all. So I would love for us to have a consensus even around language. For me, I describe myself as a disabled woman. I do not see disability as a bad thing, but a very positive thing. I would be a different person if I wasn't disabled, so I would encourage you, please begin to facilitate conversations, because what are you afraid of? By using the wrong word, you might be embarrassed. But by you being embarrassed and not doing anything, the risk is we exclude people. And what is worse? To be momentarily shy and reluctant about making a mistake, or exclude people. Ensuring that we are continuously having dialogues and moving the conversation forward is what's important. But when we think about what the collective is, and moving from language to even this conference, when we think about economics, what's important to realize is the impact that disability has in our world day to day. We need to think about disability and accessibility as an investment and not a cost. Here in France, there is legislation about the recruitment and employment of disabled people. If you are a company with more than 20 employees, there is an understanding that you have at least 6% of your employees identify as disabled. But we live in a world where nobody will say that they're disabled. There is such stigma attached to it. However, in turn, if you do not have that employer database, what you can do is look for it in suppliers, or you can donate to charity. We don't actually have to do any action. We can just pay off our responsibilities. So how do we think about this as the fact that disability is part of all of our society, when we know that the spending power of disabled people is $2.9 trillion per year? But me, I'm Irish. When we reflect the realities, 15% of disabled women in Ireland are employed. There is a pool of talent that we are missing out on because we do not see these people as viable people. And to give you a final example as to how that takes place, one of my favorite quotes is that it's not that disabled people didn't exist, it's that the buildings were inaccessible. For me, when I think about this topic, I am mindful that we are here in a tent today talking about disability and accessibility. But how did you get to this room? Did you climb a flight of steps? If anybody was a wheelchair user, they would not able to be here. This session is translated in French and English, which is wonderful, but what about if you are deaf? How would you engage in this space? And that is not a criticism of this conference, but thinking about the ableism in society and who we fail to include. My guess is if you are in this room, you care about changing the world. The people who do not are in the other sessions. So what I ask for you today is, if it is just us who care about changing the world, it will be too late and too long. So when you leave here today, talk to 3 people who were not here. Go to work tomorrow and raise this as an agenda item and ask people, is this accessible and where are the disabled people? Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sinead. You understood that this is the place to be. We've just been told. Christian Clot, so what do you do? And why did you commit yourself? Why are you engaged? Happy to be here and happy to be listening to different vision, to this notion of commitment. I mean, I'll come back later on to the mechanism of commitment, and I became director of a research institute, which is a Human Adaptation Institute, which is the only one in the world which studies human beings in real life conditions, in cognitive functions. How do human beings adapt to new situations, how they evolve? And, you know, people who are submitted to climate stress, migrant, who are shift, and we also do creations to go further in the studies, and we come back from a mission where with 20 men and 10 women and women, men and women, we went in different climatic conditions. If you're hot today, well, remember that right now, where it's 36 degrees, we were at 48 degrees for 40 days. So what happens for a human being, for the brain, when he faces situations which are new and that goes beyond him, you know, and of course people must be committed, you know, start the mission and go into this, you know, go into these conditions. And in all the works we do, people who are, you know, invested, it's not always easy, but we can understand what are the adaptation mechanisms, but also this notion of commitment, because the observation we make, and this is where this notion of crisis management or crisis mitigation, people get involved or engaged when they face a situation where they lose control or they annoys them. 95% of associated NGOs who fight against a disease or climate change or problems were created by people who were directly impacted or directly or indirectly on, by the problem they fight against. So why should we wait to be facing the crisis? What should we wait to be facing reality to start saying, okay, let's go for it, I'll commit myself, engage myself. So how can we make sure that today, of course, the crisis is present. We are in this time of human history where for the first time we got the 3 systemic crises coming at the same time, environmental, technological, and societal, but that's unique, never unprecedented, you know, but the main problems will be 5, 10, 6, 10 years with the arrival of major climate disaster. But, you know, we've been looking at this for 60 years, you know, and let's do something about it. Well, we tried just about everything for the last 60 years, since the first laws were drafted in the 50s, and they said the same thing on the first documents. You know, we wanted to involve and make people dream. So we ask ourselves the question, what are the absolute necessities that a human being should have to get engaged? Today, I don't have I don't have time to give you all the answers, but 3 notions, however, are indispensable, fundamental for the brain to say, okay, I'm going to shift from what I talk and I look to I act. First, emotion. Emotion. You cannot make a decision which is not driven by an emotion. The emotion is essential, and today we face a world where emotions are parameterized by systems which are outside of our control. You know, the system of reward, like the social systems, you know, the brain with some kind of a reward, you know, it's provided by social networks and constant injunctions. You're bombarded with so much information, and we are so caught into this storm of information that it's difficult for us to give our brain air, space to breathe. Emotions are paroxysmic, which is an expression that each time there is an event, there are huge surges of violent reactions because we function on paroxysmic parameter. Emotion is the basis of all. So what are your emotions? What triggers an emotion? What will make you move? Of course, it's easier if emotion is positive. So I would say the first thing that will move us is love. And never forget that usually we act because we love something we wish to protect. Second thing we need, time. Time is the essence. There is no commitment engagement without time to do things, very much like emotion. We are under so much time pressure and fiction and of things that in fact we don't take time. The more we invent things to save time, the less time we have. So this is an absolute corollary which has existed for years. So today we have to give time to time. Okay, maybe we'll discuss it again, how to give time to the engagement, but without the time taken, there is no engagement, there will be only words. Those notions of emotions, amazement and cooperation, because you cannot work alone, you know. So these are the three keys today to create engagement. And the question we should ask ourselves, okay, you here means that you're already in the engagement process. And as you were saying so well a couple of minutes ago, so how are we going to create the necessary emotion and give the necessary time to all the citizens to be engaged? 38 minutes, 16 seconds to talk about the time needed. Mutgoba.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this platform. I'm really glad to be here. In terms of my intervention and the question, what is your action? I really thought about it, and I thought about how in my work, wherever I go, a lot of people don't know that at least 67 countries in the world still criminalize LGBTQI people, and 11 of those can effect the death penalty. And for those who know, when they see the pictures on the TV or the outrage when they see a gay man being pushed to death in Iran or in Syria, is the outrage for that moment. They don't connect that some of those people escape persecution and come to countries like France, like the UK, to Europe, where they feel safer, and they seek asylum, and they are refugees. So there's no connection there sometimes to say, okay, so those are the people who are suffering, and this is the reason why they escape persecution to come and seek asylum. When they come to these countries, they become refugees, they become asylum seekers, they become the others, the unwanted. There's no reminder of why they have escaped. So this is why I joined Micro Rainbow to work on this, because I am a refugee from Zimbabwe, and I know the journey. I've walked through this journey. The assumption is always that when someone comes to a place like the UK, they are now safer. They've got a roof over their head, but the challenge is still there for LGBTQI people. They're placed with other refugees who are coming perhaps from their home country. Maybe they're fleeing war. They still hold homophobic views. They still have these challenges. So we have a situation where people are still experiencing abuse. They're still being beaten up by other refugees because of their sexuality. They're still trying to find safer accommodation because they can't stay with other refugees. So it was in one of our work where we have social inclusion, trying to ensure that people are not isolated or alone or suffering from extreme isolation, that we realized that half of the people we're working with were homeless. They would rather not report other refugees to the police for abusing them and become homeless. Because if there's no action towards the other refugees, they still continue facing the same challenges. So that's why we started our safe housing, our safe accommodation, as well as realizing that this journey is very long. I know for Europe, it's pretty much the same in terms of it can take long, people are not allowed to work, and you're going through this process while living in poverty. You have so many challenges, and yet refugees are some of the most talented people where we could actually be utilized in their new communities, but that is not done. So we have someone going through the process for years. I was a qualified teacher, and I was going through this process and not working for more than 3 years when I could have contributed to my new community. So in our action, we intervene. We make sure that we train people while they're waiting. We train them about the UK labor market, about the labor market near where they live. That means, you know, refreshing their CVs, looking at further education. For those who don't speak English, it is getting them to learn the language so that they can become contributing members in their new communities. And one of the other questions that you asked was, why? Why did you do this? As an intersectional woman, I consider myself an intersectional person. I ride in so many communities. As a black woman in race, because of my gender, because of my sexuality, class as a poor person, because of you know, as a migrant and a refugee. So when I think of why I have to do this work, I become really passionate about it. I think of all these, you know, intersections of discrimination, and that can affect the people that we work with. So I'm really driven to continue our work. And when I hear questions like, you know, how do we commit to changing the world? I always think, which part of the world, where, who are we committing to? There are so many different parts that we can commit to, but always I think we can always start where we are. We can always try to look at marginalized communities. We have so much privilege sometimes that we don't see others. So I always say, wherever you are is looking to see who is not on the table. Do we know who is marginalized within marginalized communities? We were talking about disabled people just now. There are, you know, disabled people who are LGBTQI. Are those people considered? So it's just standing there and looking to see who is not there. You don't have to be part of a community to champion them. You have to want to understand them. You have to look at their challenges. You have to use your privilege to champion. You don't always have to do something. You can even amplify voices or at least understand the issues. We are in an environment where we have a lot of anti-migration policies coming up. It's understanding why those are there and how they will affect other communities, challenging our politicians, challenging ourselves, challenging our leaders in our communities and businesses to see how can we support, what does this mean. It's really looking where we are, standing still, looking where we are and seeing who's missing, whose voice is unheard, and championing those voices.
Merci.
Thank you, Mudgoba. I give the floor to Ashwini Kakar. Same question. What do you do today and why did you engage yourself?
I just want to say.
Ashwini, un peu plus près le micro.
I just want to say that I want to leave you with a few thoughts today. Committing to change the world, not only for all of us, but also from the point of view of any economists who might be here, or for the circle of economists who are conducting this whole convention. So let me start by saying that all of us can collectively bring the world to a better future and also bring a better world to the future by thinking of ourselves as pure custodians of our planet Earth for the next 30,000 days, because that's what our life is, only 30,000 days, of which the first 2,500 probably don't count, the last don't count 2,500, but we can make a difference on every one of the rest of those 25,000 days. And now, can we, all of us, make frugal living fashionable? I think that's crucial. You know, let me give you a couple of examples. Every year, 100 billion new garments are made. 100 billion. And 92 billion tons of garments are thrown away every year. So every time we buy our 8th or 10th or 12th garment, can we just think about it? Look at food. Every year, 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted. This accounts for the third largest carbon footprint in the world. Wasted carbon footprint. You know, this is just behind the United States and China. And not only this, I think either this food is dumped or is wasted in the farm gates or on the food plates. Now, not only this while, 9,000 employees of Action Contre la Faim are working in the field every day trying to save lives in 55 countries, but 25,000 people are dying of hunger every single day. And, you know, this wastage of food is really untenable. In any case, how can we solve the world's biggest problems without deploying the best brains and the best technologies? So can we, all of us, resolve to deploy the best brains and the best technologies to solve the biggest problems in the world? I mean, in these kind of problems, I mean, we've approached the big tech companies to say, please nominate your best people for 2 years. I mean, the best people in satellite mapping, in artificial intelligence, in various fields, so that we can resolve the biggest problems of the world collectively. Now, can we also think in terms of building a whole concept of good for the earth, good for us all, you know? Because if it's good for the earth, it is definitely good for this, for each and every one of us. And rebuilding our relationship with nature. And in fact, for those in corporates, I would urge you to give nature a seat on the corporate board so that nature can be represented on each of the companies that operate in the world. There's another point for all of us, which is, can we start to think about ungreeding ourselves and our world? Because as Gandhi said, the world has enough for fulfilling the need of every single person, but not for fulfilling the greed of every single person. So I think that's an equally important aspect. A quick one for the economists. I think this discipline was chosen for the Nobel Prize not without reason. I think it's very, very important for the economists to come up with a new model which can think in terms of 4 little things. One, low-cost robotics and low-cost artificial intelligence are going to overtake the human labor and human mind in a very short span of time. Now, can we think in terms of flexicurity, which is flexible security for humans and machines to exist together? Can we also think in terms of the octopus of inequality, which is going not only into financial areas, but technology and, into technology, gender, education, work, health, social, all kinds of domains. And how can we build a new economic model which will take into account this? Then raising the cost of conflict. I mean, in our world today, the cost of conflict is relatively low. How can a new economic model ensure that there's huge cost of getting into conflict? Equally, I think making cooperation and collective will and wisdom that much more fruitful. How can we make it fruitful for everybody to cooperate? For example, the cost of the Ukraine war is already more than $4 trillion. Now, if there was a new economic model which would have prevented this, all this could have been saved. Equally, I think visibly sharing global technology between all of us so that, and technology is also changing all the time. What we need to do is to share it quickly so that everybody can be on the same page and everybody can make progress towards a better world. So I leave it here for the moment. Thank you.
On termine ce...
So we'll finish this first round with a blanket duty. Thank you. I will try and speak with my bad French, and I hope that you will understand what I'm trying to say. Hi, I'm Mexican, I'm an anthropologist, and I work at L'Oréal. Before telling you what I do as a job, I just want to tell you why I work for L'Oréal. I'm the only person here working for a corporate group. People think maybe that corporations are not acting or not enough. But corporations are very important in society. We employ a lot of people, millions of people across the world, and we also have a very high level of responsibility. The world today is experiencing a crisis of confidence. If we look at the Lehman-Truss barometer that looks at the confidence of people across the planet, we can see that over the past 25 years, the confidence is dwindling. Governments, businesses, NGOs, and media, confidence in all of these is dwindling. There's more confidence today in businesses than in the others, because businesses, they have a certain economic power, and they can help to change the world. So to do this, it's important to act. It's important to have values and principles that are strong. I'm going to tell you why I joined L'Oréal. I've been there for 2.5 years. I was in the Netherlands in my last job. I was headhunted by somebody who talked to me about L'Oréal. And I asked myself straight away, what would I do at L'Oréal? And I looked at the company. It's an extraordinary company. It's a very committed company from an environmental point of view, but also from a societal point of view. And I wondered myself, as an anthropologist, what would I do? My husband asked the same thing. So I had lunch with my husband, and I asked him, does the world really need lipstick? It's an important question with climate change and all of the challenges. I wondered what I could possibly do in a beauty company. But as an anthropologist, I know very well that beauty is an essential thing for human beings. No civilization can live without beauty. From the Muratu to the Metabes, beauty creates confidence in ourselves and creates a belonging to groups. Beauty helps us when we're sick. Beauty helps us when we want to go back into society after being exposed to poverty. Beauty, it has a role to play. But my second question, and this is what we talked about with my husband, is beauty relevant? It's necessary, but is it relevant in the world today? And I said to myself, yes, it is. Because when I see the world, there are climate problems, there are social problems, and among the social problems, it's the inclusion problems that are the biggest. L'Oréal is a company that is sold in 150 countries. It produces for 2 billion people, and it's the 4th biggest advertiser in the world. So with this, we've got a huge responsibility. And with the company, we want to create a more inclusive world. And when a company like ours and society has the same need, there's an intersection that's created. Our philosophy is to create beauty to help the world progress. It's beauty that's more inclusive, more generous, more responsible for the planet, and more responsible from a societal point of view. Of course, in the executive committee, we've got lots of people. Some people, so our target, we have societal targets and environmental targets. We've got a very strong leader when it comes to sustainable development, Alexandra Pâté. But at the same time, we have Barbara Vernos, who's trying to change the industry. Petra Comy wants to make the industry focus on green sciences. 15% of products are going to be organic products by 2030, or generated by abundant minerals. In finance, we have responsible financiers. We're investing a lot in funds for the climate, for hunger. We've got a foundation. We do a lot for women's empowerment, for women in science. And we do a lot for creating a more inclusive world. I met Sinead. We were studying, our employees, and for the first time, we asked them whether they belong to a minority. I haven't got the answers, but I know that 67% provided responses to the questionnaire, which is great. So what did I do? What do I do? I'm in charge of the group's engagement or commitment and public affairs. I talk to people outside the company. I try and help them to understand the business and the intersections. So I talk to very diverse people to try and understand them, because communication and confidence require multiple voices. It's important to understand. It's important to have empathy to be able to act. Thank you very much, Blanca. Bertrand, do you want us to invite the audience to ask questions before we move on? If you have a question, raise your hand, and please choose a speaker for your question. The microphones are going round. Off we go. Please introduce yourself too. Yes, you can hear me. Please introduce yourself. Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. Perhaps you heard me yesterday afternoon. I'm Dina Fourneret. I'm a qualified person for working with the disabled. I am part of the few 20 people qualified by the National Council for Disabled. I had a stroke. I had my life beforehand, and now I'm in my new life. And I wanted to thank you and say well done, because for 3 days now, I've been to different places, and here we've been talking about something really genuine, true. I think this is the way we can all be better. We can be in a win-win situation. It brings to mind a question. Would you want to insert into all of that the share of invisible disability that exists? You know, earlier on, yes, we met up earlier on, just by chance. It was just for bottles, and nobody had thought about them. I've lost my French.
Français, parce que là c'est parti, je suis
I suffer from aphasia. And where is your question? I've got a boat. It's a sports boat. And it's launching the Grand Aphasique Impulse, the big aphasia impulse. It's left from Athens. It's going to New York next year, and then we'll come back here. The idea is to impel this idea of the life beforehand and the life afterwards with hindsight. So aphasic impulse. We'll let the speakers say something. Sinead, for example, would you like to say anything about the taking into account of invisible disability?
For your question and for your help earlier. What you were describing was you found out that I drink too much Diet Coke, particularly early in the morning, in that I went to the bar and ordered a L'eau gazeuse and a Coca Zero. But I could not reach the counter, it was too high. And you kindly offered if you could support with reaching those drinks for me or paying. I was embarrassed you discovered my Diet Coke habit, but very grateful for your help. You bring up an excellent question around visible and invisible disabilities. Disability is broad. If I was to ask people in this room to raise your hand if you were disabled, I imagine there may be, hello, bonjour, bonjour. But if I asked you how many of you have increased the text size on your iPhone to be able to read it, there is more of you. If I asked you how many of you can only hear out of one ear, how many of you have dyslexia, How many of you use text messages because phone calls are difficult? The reality is disability is a broad category. How many of you experience anxiety? How many of you have had depression? Have any of you had cancer or an eating disorder? So much of the challenge with disability is that we think of it in one dimension. That is also the challenge with legislation, policy, and compliance, that when we design spaces to be accessible, we design them for wheelchair users. And while that is important, the reality is we are all getting older. Lots of the population of this conference, some of them look like they are retirees. It is difficult to manage those steps. We need to build a more sustainable and accessible world. But just to build on some of the comments that came here, I think what's really interesting about the discussion here is that, Ash, you talked about, and I would love to challenge, if it is good for the planet, it is good for the people. I think this is one of the questions where asking who is in the room, asking where these things dissect is really important. What we decided in terms of sustainability and being good for the planet is the removal of plastic straws and the removal of single-use plastic. And while this does increase the impact of sustainability on the planet, it removes access for disabled people. For disabled people, some of whom don't have use of their arms, they need a plastic straw. How many of you have tried to drink with a paper straw? C'est mauvais. C'est mauvais. C'est un cauchemar. And yet, who is in the room when the policies and the decisions are being made? And as we think about the impact that the fashion industry has in sustainability, I think that is a really good and important question. We need to buy less, we need to wear more, but we need to buy more accessible clothes. For example, how many people here have had to sleep in a dress? Have had to sleep in a dress ever? Where is the zip in a dress? Where is the zip in a dress? How do you get out of it? You need help, because a dress was designed by a man in an era where women had husbands or domestic help. It is the same reason why women do not have pockets in their clothes. It's so you buy handbags. Men have pockets because they are businessmen and they are functional. We need to be bigger consumers and buy handbags. So how do we redesign fashion as a whole? How do we wear the items that we buy at least 30 times? How do we use the tote bags that we have and use them at least 250 times, even when made of canvas? I think what the discussion has brought about today is that we need more people in the room where decisions are made for better innovations and better economies. And that includes all of us. You are valid with your disability if it is visible like mine or if it is invisible like others. Disability will affect all of us at some stage in our lives. Merci.
Blanca, vous vouliez rajouter quelque chose sur cette question?
Would you like to add something, Blanca? Yes, very quickly. Of course, there are many people who have disabilities and not visible, and that's why we did the study at L'Oréal, to know about this, because we've got to get rid of the stigma. There are lots of things that are not visible, neurodivergency, for example. There are lots of things that we don't see. We have to get rid of the stigma and talk about them. And I think, when you have an enterprising company that takes into account the needs of others, it becomes more empathetic and stronger, because, what helps some is going to help others. Are there other questions in the room? There are 3 of you to raise your hands. Please try and be quite short with your questions. We've only got 12 minutes. Please tell us who you are and who the question is for. Yes, hello. I don't know whether I should ask it in English or French. Say it in French. My question is about for the president of Action Against Hunger. I managed a company in India, and I always wondered why we can't manage in these organizations to get rid of famine. What's happening? Why can't we get rid of famine? Why can't we get rid of famine in the world? In India, for example.
When I was in Chennai, for example, you can see that people are suffering for real. And I'm wondering why an NGO like Action Contre la Faim is not able to eradicate the hunger, as simple as that.
Hunger is a very complex issue. It's not just, poverty, it's not just inequality, it's not just, but I think great efforts are being made around the world to prevent the deaths of 25,000 people every day. And in India, it's the same story. But it all starts with, in most cases, malnutrition or poverty. And poverty comes from, inequality or conflict. So it's a very big kind of complex issue. But if we have the will and the wisdom, this world certainly has enough food, enough logistics, enough technology to solve the problem globally forever. But it requires that will and wisdom of everybody combined. And if that is there, it is quite easy. I gave you the example of wastage. That is only one of the ways in which it can be solved. Severe and acute malnutrition and so on can be solved in a very different way and very simple answers. But I think collectively, the world, all of us, we need to sit down and and I just give you another example, this will and wisdom. We have been able to overcome COVID. In 3 years, 6.8 million people died of COVID. And how much was spent to resolve COVID around the world? Take a guess. How much money? $19 trillion was spent to eliminate COVID. $19 trillion, 12 zeros. And to eliminate hunger, it is difficult for all the organizations put together. In the same period, 20 million people died of hunger. But it is difficult for us to be able to get $20 billion a year to eliminate hunger. So $20 trillion was spent. Very good. I think we found the right answers. We did the right thing. The will and the wisdom was perfect. But we also need the same will and wisdom. And why did this happen? Because COVID affected everybody equally. Hunger does not affect everybody equally. So let us collectively find the will and the wisdom. Thank you.
Yes, Cécile Delettré, in International Féminin. This is for Blanca and Bertrand Bardet. Concerning the confidence crisis, you were talking about the confidence crisis in businesses, NGOs, and business NGO partnerships. How can we engage the public when most people think that it's just about greenwashing or social washing, when it's L'Oréal, for example, that is working on local actions for Rosegras or working with women at international level? Thank you for your question. So this confidence crisis also comes alongside an attention crisis. That there's not enough attention. We want answers quickly. We want quick answers saying what the position is. And for many things, we have to understand. We have to understand the depth of the problem. And as Sinead said, sometimes there are dilemmas. You can do something that's good for the planet, but that can have consequences on employment. You have to think about things in a broader way. I think that the only way to deal with this is to have real conversations, not just to adopt stances. There are many people who adopt a position on social media. And I'm saying before adopting a position, you have to understand the situation. You also have to be a legitimate person to talk about something. I wouldn't be able to talk about something if I didn't feel legitimate to do so. If I don't have something concrete to say about it. It's a question of dialogue. It's a question of dialogue with a lot of strength and a lot of, deep-reaching thinking. And that's what I'm looking for in my teams. I've got lots of diverse teams in terms of ability, in terms of nationality, age, but also it's important to talk with a lot of people, and the more diverse those people are, the better, so that you can have a better understanding. Bertrand, yes, let me say a few words to conclude, and then we can take it. But we'll take a question first. One question, maybe two. Yes, madam. Hello, Blanca. Mr. Kaka was talking about wasting, food waste. With my family, We have a family startup. It's an anti-waste app for go-to-go applications. So it's to look at environmental and societal problems. It's about acting not just against waste, cosmetic waste, because the figures are huge. It's about fighting against precariousness. Over 35% of French people don't have the means to buy hygienic products. Families change nappies of their children once a day sometimes. I just want to ask you, I have my own opinion because we've been working on the question for a year now. In your opinion, Blanca, the cosmetics world, is it ready to act against cosmetic waste and answer this terrible paradox that alongside the millions of euros wasted and alongside that you have millions of French people who suffer from poverty? Yes, at L'Oréal we're already acting. We have to. So systematically we've got 36 brands. And we've got brands that are very accessible, shampoo for €2, for example, through to luxury brands. But there's a whole range of products. And we've also worked very much with the economic crisis on more accessible brands so that we could focus on product accessibility. We are against waste. We are making lots of efforts to change the way we sell our products. So we can have perfumes, hygienic products, products with refills. We work on water loop factories so that water is reused. And we'll have more between now and 2030. We're also working with trade fairs. We've got a product, it's called a shower head. I don't know how to say that in French. So it saves water. Up to 70% of the water is saved. We're also creating products that don't need to be rinsed or can be rinsed very easily. So we are looking at things from different points of view. We're looking at plastic recycling. We're looking at different materials so that less plastic is being used. These are things that are very important for us. So I would be happy to talk with you after the conference if you like. Thank you. Let's hand over to Bertrand now. Can everybody hear me? Perhaps Christian and Mood would like to say something to conclude very quickly. We've got 3 minutes. Very quickly, a quick conclusion, Mood.
I think very quickly to conclude, I would just say everything has been touched on, but I think as individuals, we need to go out there and perhaps use an intersectional lens to everything we approach to understand people, to effect change. We all can start change from where we are, from where we stand in our homes, in our personal lives, in our organizations, in our companies. We always have to be alert and to want to have change and to amplify voices of those who are different to us. Stand there and think, whose voice can I amplify? What change? Where can I help? Where can I support? It doesn't have to be really huge changes. It can be really supporting small grassroots organizations, supporting charities, or really just understanding the issues and challenging ignorance. That's it.
Thank you.
Je vais être très rapide.
I'm going to be very quick because time is running out. So all of the discussions go back to this same idea. It's very difficult for us to see the big picture. So act on what is important for you, but take a few minutes a day, a few hours a week or per month to question how your problem, your cause, is linked to the rest and how you can invest, not just for your own cause, but to integrate that into something that's a whole. It's important to look at the complexity, not just the one thing. So let's work together, let's take time to do that, and we'll be able we'll be making some proposals at our institute, the Human Adaptation Institute, but it's important to make the time in order to commit.
The thing that I am taking away from the conference was something that Minister Pascal Donohoe said yesterday, which was pessimism is irresponsible. Finding the balance between keeping organizations and governments accountable and getting involved and losing hope is what's key for the future.
Alors j'anticipe.
So we've had lots of presents. So what you've said is very true. It's very emotional as well, dear Christian. Again, I've been coming here for 20 years. There are some very important moments, very strong moments. So there's something that I will be taking away with me, not because it's a magic figure. We've talked a lot about what we have to do. And, how do we do it, though? How do we create change, as Sinead said? How can we not be fearful? How can we change people's look, the way they see the world? How can we feel concerned by this planet and feel concerned for all of the inhabitants on this planet, not just our own little corner of the world? It's not easy to open our eyes. There are lots of adverse conditions at individual level. As Christian said, there are different conditions. It's important to prioritize positive emotions rather than our negative emotions. It's important to find time. And thank you for coming on this Sunday morning to take time to talk with us. But, we're not alone. Cooperation is there and it's important. It's about working collectively. There are limits. There are legal limits. There are moral limits. There are mental limits. There are financial limits. As you reminded us, we're able to spend $19 trillion on COVID, but we're not finding even a fraction of that amount to fight against hunger. And Muda, you said sometimes these difficulties build up. And the third point, obviously it's a source of wealth. We spend a lot of time saying this, that we don't have unhappy people on the stage here. Wealth for ourselves, wealth for the world. This is important. We mustn't, just 1 minute, please. We've got to target things properly. We can't do everything all the time for everybody. We want to know what our cause is, but we need to know how to articulate that cause, again, with the life of our planet and the species on the planet. It's possible straight away. It's possible for everybody. It's not just for a happy few in a corner of the world that is far away. It's also possible for companies. It's quite new. We talked a lot about responsibility of shareholders, and we've been reminded that it's not just about shareholders. That's a very positive message. It's still too rare, that kind of message. Sixth point, I talked about gardens to begin with. My little balcony, my little plot of land. This is something that's obvious. It's obvious to listen to other people. Our garden is our planet. We can't just stop at the border of our garden. We need to share things. We need to share our planet. Like you asked economists to think. We need to think about an economy for action. It's easier said than done. Let me come back to the question that was asked. This action, this engagement means passion, but also responsibility and confidence. And confidence is, in fact, the ingredient that has suffered over the last few years. There are lots of difficulties that we've been talking about in the public sector, in the government sector, in the private sector, in companies, but also in civil society. There's a magic triangle there. The relations between these three summits of the triangle have deteriorated. People are not confident anymore. They don't have confidence in each other. So perhaps we need to reach out and accept taking a risk between the three pillars of this triangle. And to finish, I would like to cite somebody. I've often used this citation, if you've already heard it. I think it applies to the conversation that we've had today. Jean Giraudoux in The Guerre de Troie n'aura pas lieu. Maybe you remember that. It's a play written in 1936. The idea is to avoid the Troy War. Ulysses says to the people from Troy that the privilege of great people is that they can look at catastrophes from the balcony. And I think that we are the great. In the park here, we're on the balcony. But we can't have that privilege. We need to get together. We need to come down from our balcony and make sure that the planet is not collapsing. Thank you.
Merci à tous d'avoir été.
Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And I'll let you go to the next session.